Hello, everybody, and welcome to this afternoon's webinar, What Starts Well, Ends Well. Thank you for coming along, and thank you also to our two presenters today. So we have Fiona Webush and Rufus James. Fiona is currently the Senior Teacher for Teacher Training at the University of Queensland's Institute of Continuing and TESOL Education, affectionately known as ICE-TUQ, and she's a very keen advocate for TESOL professional development. Rufus has had a wide and varied career in TESOL since 2004. She's currently a NEAS Quality Assurance Assessor and freelance CELTA trainer. Her interests include integrating emotional intelligence into the classroom, very interesting, teacher training and mentoring, and coffee, amongst other things. So thank you so much for coming along and presenting for us today.
Thanks very much for having us. So is it over to us now, Sophie? Are people checking in? Great. Yeah. Thank you so much. Welcome, everybody. Good afternoon or good morning or good evening, depending on where you are watching from. I'm going to kick things off for us this afternoon here in beautiful Brisbane, and then I'll hand over to Rufus shortly, who will tag team a little bit throughout the session. But as Sophie mentioned, the title of our presentation today is What Starts Well, Ends Well. We'll be focusing on giving effective instructions and also monitoring learner progress. Even though we've said monitoring, what we really mean is supporting learner progress, actually. So we'll talk more about that in a few moments' time. But just as everybody's settling in to the session, there's an abstract there just for those who might be watching a little bit later. We have really targeted this session for early career language teachers, but we hope that there'll be some takeaways for everyone, no matter what point of your career you might be in. But we thought we'd better start off with a little bit about us and who we are, and we couldn't start a webinar about activities and instructions without an activity. So you'll notice myself and Rufus in the pictures on the left there, and pictures of our hometowns on the right-hand side. So just to test out all your equipment, we wonder if you might have a go at guessing, where are we from originally? We're in Brisbane now, so it's not Brisbane. What are our hometowns? Have a go, see if you can type in. Fiona is from in the comment box. Let's see, can we see the comment?
Melbourne, Sydney.
Not Sydney.
London.
Melbourne's correct.
No, not
Somewhere
London.
in the north for Rufus.
Yes.
Quite right too. But where?
Yeah, I have to say, I said London the other day and Rufus nearly killed me.
Not happy.
So let's do the big reveal. I am from Melbourne, as someone rightly said. Well done to you. Originally, and now based in Brisbane. And Rufus is from, drumroll, Leeds. So she is a northerner.
Yeah, all the best people are.
So Rufus and I met at English Australia events actually a few years ago and have been collaborating together on training practices and professional development ever since. So we're delighted to be presenting together today. That's where we are from, but we'd also love to get a sense for where all you are from. So could you take a moment just to type into the comment box your city and where you're from? Let us know.
Okay, and this is Sophie again. I'm just going to be reading out people's answers.
Sure.
So we have Gold Coast, Iran, Argentina, Melbourne, Austria,
Hey.
Wollongong, Brizzy,
Wow.
Hungary, Ukraine.
Fantastic. We are the United Nations. Fantastic.
Perth is definitely represented, as is China and Sydney.
Wow. Thanks so much, everybody. We really appreciate you giving up your time and joining us today. We hope to try and make it worth your while. So it's great for us to get a little bit of a sense of where you might be coming from, and that tells us a little bit about potentially your classroom context. But we're going to jump straight into our classroom context now. In a moment on the screen, you'll see our classrooms, in the training classroom here in Brisbane. And for Rufus and I, our classrooms are really active places because we believe, as I'm sure you do, that language teaching involves communication, and that kind of communication involves interaction and action among our students and the teachers. So while our students are moving around, they're standing up, they're talking, they might be on their phones for an activity, pushing paper around, working in pairs and groups in the classroom. All of those activities typically start with the teacher fronting the room to set up the activity, deliver the instruction, and get things off and running. But while our students are really busy, we are too. So we're often moving around, monitoring, listening out for if anybody's having any difficulties, and also getting ready and preparing for how we're going to transition to the next part of the activity. So, you know, whilst we're pretty confident at doing this nowadays and setting up an activity, that wasn't always the case. In fact, I'm just going to have a go at my slides. Just a little delay. I'll come down and try on this side. Just having a little rest. Sorry, folks, won't be a moment. There we go. When we were new to teaching 20 years ago, this was actually a part of our practice that both of us agreed made us quite nervous, is getting an activity up and running. We were often so delighted when students were actually in the activity. They were like, oh, phew, okay, that's my bit over for a while. And what we noticed was we were actually forgetting to do the monitoring or the reflections and getting ready for the transition. But fortunately, over the years, we've worked on that in our practice, and now we have some strategies and better staging in place to help ensure that those activities get off to a good start. They start well, and 99% of the time, they end well. So we figure, though, you probably already know what some of those stages and strategies are. So let's jump into your classroom. In a moment, we're going to give you a couple of scenarios. In fact, you'll see 3 scenarios that are all about setting up a speaking activity in your classroom. As you see the activities come up on the screen, if it gives you an idea of, oh, if I was in that situation, I would, that's what we want to hear from you. So let's have a look at what the scenarios are and then take a moment to write in the comment box. Number 1, I would do this. Number 2, I would do this. Let's see what some of your responses are. We'll give you a moment. Just about 30 seconds. All right, are there any responses you could share with us, Sophie?
Sure. Someone said aim and instructions before they move.
Okay.
Someone else would use gestures for stand up and then a circular motion. Another person has said loud voice, clear instructions.
Okay, great. Well, it sounds like you already have some similar responses to what we had. So we might share those with you. Thank you for sharing your responses. So for number 1, what did we think, Rufus? We thought if we were wanting students to stand in a circle, we would ask them to stand up, form a circle. Yeah, exactly. Using gestures is a really helpful guide. Secondly, during the activity, you notice 2 students are not on task. We thought probably the first thing we would do is actually just move a little closer to get a sense for whether we actually needed to intervene or whether they were just having a moment off task. And finally, at the end of the speaking activity, if we want to ask students to reflect on their progress, we thought one idea was, the first thing we like to do is get a sense for how did everybody manage that activity. For example, was it easy, medium, or difficult, that activity? That helps us get a real understanding of how the whole class experienced the activity. So you've had a couple of activities now already, and that's really how our webinar is going to go today. We're going to run you through a series of activities that we hope will allow us to discuss what giving effective instructions are all about and model some of those for you. Spend a bit of time on monitoring and reflecting, and also leave you with some resources that you can refer to later, as perhaps there's something in your practice that you want to shine the spotlight on. So it might be those other resources that will be great for you to refer to a bit later. As with all English Australia webinars, there'll also be a Q&A session at the end. So let's get cracking. I think I've said the word activity maybe 20 times already.
I'm counting. It's a lot.
So we thought we'd better clarify what an activity is. So we looked to a definition that comes from Jim Scrivener in his book, Learning Teaching. He defined an activity this way, but you'll notice that some of the words are missing. So we'll ask you to take a moment to make your way through the definition. You don't have to type them in, but just move with your eyes, move those words across into the definition. We'll give you a minute. I reckon we should have those answers by now.
Definitely.
Let's see, Rufus. Normally, if we were in the classroom, I would ask you to check with a partner. But since you're my partner for today, let's see if we got the right answers. An activity is something that learners do that involves them using or working with
Language.
Let's see. To achieve some specific
Outcome.
Yes, well done. The outcome may reflect a
Real world outcome.
real world
It's gotta be.
outcome. Absolutely. Or it may purely be for the purpose of learning, such as this gap fill activity. Or if it was a grammar session, you might be filling in the gaps to find the present perfect.
So I noticed you were playing music in a previous activity and in this one as well. Why is that?
Actually, I tend to use music as a way to signal to students that it's time, I'm off, it's over to you for you to do your work. And I can also stop and start the music to signal to students, okay, if the music is off, back to me. So it's a good signal, and it also creates just a nice atmosphere while the activity is
That's right. Not too much silence.
Yeah, but I tend to use music that doesn't have lyrics, otherwise it can be a bit distracting.
That's right.
Yeah.
So we've looked at the definition of an activity, but why are they a useful tool for us to use, especially in the communicative language classroom? When we looked at that definition by Scrivener, there were two words that he used that really resonated with Fiona and myself, and they were involve and outcome. So we're going to have a quick look at some of the theory that underpins exactly why we do involve learners in their own language learning, so to maximise those student outcomes. Now, many of our communicative activities rely on the learner's willingness to communicate, but not just that, to also take risks. And this is something that's mentioned as a principle of language learning by Douglas Brown. We know, however, that not all students are created equal, are created alike. So some students may be far more willing to communicate, to experiment, to take risks. And one of our jobs, therefore, as the teacher, is actually to provide that safe space where students, maybe with less motivation or confidence, can experiment, can take those risks. and experiment with communication. Now, Penny mentions many teacher roles in her several books.
Mm-hmm.
The one that we focused on was that of the activator, which is that it is essential for students to engage with and use the meaning and the use of the language for them to actually become successful language users and for acquisition to take place. And Thornbury, last of all, he mentions 5 particular elements that it is necessary to have for successful language learning to take place. We need meaningful and sufficient input for the students. We need the opportunity for the students to use the language, so the output. And we also need scaffolded and supported interaction for our students. So that's 3. I wonder if anyone knows the other 2 elements.
Input, interaction, output. There's 2 more.
There's 2 more. Do you know them?
I'll let them have a go.
If you have an idea, pop it into the comments box. Just 10 seconds for this.
Feedback,
Sophia,
someone
yes.
said.
Yes, feedback and
Motivation, interaction.
Yes!
beautiful.
That's it.
Beautiful,
Input,
exactly right.
interaction, output, motivation, feedback. Well done.
Beautiful.
Well done, everyone.
So it's clear that activities are not as easy as we first maybe think to set up, to deliver, to evaluate, to run. And we remember when we were new and beginning teachers, I suppose, how stressful it was when an activity either didn't start well, the middle was a little bit woolly, or there wasn't much meat to it, and when it just dwindled at the end. And let's be honest, just because we've been teaching for a combined total of a certain amount of years, it doesn't mean that our activities are always successful. So one of the things that we've found is a useful thing is to share the problems that we have and the solutions that we have. So we would now like to hear from you. And we're going to ask you to consider your own classroom practice and visit this answer garden, which is what we're using to gather your ideas. You can either scan the QR code with your phone, or you can pop the link into your browser. And we would like you to just give us as many answers as you can think of in 1 minute. What challenges do you face in your context when you're setting up activities? And this is for experienced teachers, new teachers, everybody has challenges. So we'll give you 1 minute for that and play some music. Yeah.
Ooh. Long explanations. Yeah,
Definitely.
literally giving effective instructions. Unclear instructions, that's our nightmare, isn't it?
That's the nightmare. That's the reality also often. So just a few more minutes. Seconds. Differentiation. The joy. All right, so just 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, thank you for your input. I can see that a lot of your answers tally with exactly what we think as well, and the challenges that we face also. Just prior to this webinar, we put out a shout for advice, assistance and ideas from our colleagues in and around Australia, and we're about to have a look at their ideas about the challenges that they face when setting up activities. So for this next slide, just have a look at some of the points that are raised. Do they tally with yours? Are they the same? Or is there anything that surprises you? Oh.
Just wait for the, wait.
I'm sorry, I was impatient.
I'm going to go back on here.
Beautiful.
There we go.
So have a quick look, just 30 seconds to have a look at these points.
Which ones really stood out to you as you were going through?
I think to me, the fact that people were really focusing on instructions was a really salient point, because if the teacher doesn't set up the activity well, the students feel lost and the teacher has the temptation to either speak more or to move on from the activity, so it becomes a kind of pointless exercise.
I think so too, and I think the focus on teacher language is definitely looking at some of these challenges that came up is something that struck me as well. So thanks so much to the Aussie ELT. If you're not familiar with Aussie ELT, it's actually a Facebook and blog space and Twitter for the Australian ELICOS sector. So jump online, not now, but at another time, and check out #AussieELT. It's a great space for conversation about what's happening in teachers' classrooms. Okay, so we're going to move into thinking about, well, they were the challenges, well then what do we do? What are some of the solutions? So we're going to have a look at how do we run activities successfully now. And when we were trying to conceptualize a framework for the whole process of setting up activities, for Rufus and I, we came to the decision that a successful activity setup is really like a good story, in that it has a captivating beginning, it has a really meaty middle where there's lots of action and interaction between characters in the classroom, it's students. And at the end, hopefully a great story or a great book will leave you reflecting on the journey that you've just had.
And wanting more.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to use this framework of beginning, middle, and end to think about the different stages of setting up an activity, and in particular, some of the actions that the teachers might have to use to get things started. So in the beginning phase, for example, the teacher might be doing something to get students' attention before they move into an activity. I'm going to pause here and give you a minute to think about what kinds of actions do you expect teachers to be doing in the beginning when they're setting up, while the students are doing something in the middle, and at the end of the activity. So take a moment just to think. You don't have to type. Okay, well, let's see if some of your ideas for what will be happening in the beginning are similar to ours. So we know we need to get students' attention first, right? And then what are we doing? I feel like this is a big reveal. There we go. Then we need to set the scene and to establish some context around what it is that the students are going to be talking about or doing. Then we're going to give the instructions for the activity themselves. So this is where the teacher language really comes in. In the middle, Rufus, what happens?
Well, in the middle, we need to ensure that students are engaged, that they are interacting with each other and with the language that we've input. As we said before, while the students are working hard on their activity, so are we. We're monitoring, we're making sure they're on task, we're checking that our instructions were clear and clarifying if necessary, and we're making sure the students have that best environment to succeed. We may need to check as well that they are on task. Now, towards the end or the close of an activity, of course, we've been taking notes maybe as we go, or we've noticed some things that need correcting. We need to prioritize those notes, and we need to provide some form of correction maybe. Another thing that is very important, and which I certainly with my own practice didn't start doing until relatively recently, is reflection. Asking the students to articulate their success and how they felt about the activity, which really puts the onus on them, puts the language learning in their hands. And of course, an activity, we never run an activity in isolation. We always run it with connection to the real world and with connection to another activity to extend the learning.
So I think it must be time for us to have a look at an activity.
Yeah, you would think so, wouldn't you? We've talked about it, we've looked at definitions and challenges. It's time to see an activity in action. Beginning, middle and end, you may recognise these very studious students with our guest teacher, Vicky Boss. And you will also notice that we have broken down the videos into the beginning, the setup, the middle and the end.
So Rufus is going to give you a task in a moment before we watch the videos. Just going to click my slide. Or maybe Sophie is. Let me see. Here we go.
So video 1 is going to be the setup of an activity, and we'll show you what that activity is. So we chose to do this. It's a speaking activity. It's a very common information gap style activity of the kind found in many, many different kinds of EFL materials and resources, A and B.
Oh, look at the dog.
I like the banana. And of course, we're teachers, so like all good teachers, you're not simply going to watch the video. We're going to give you a task. And your task is to, as you are watching the video, consider what did the teacher need to prepare, what did she say, and what did she need to manage. So let's take the first one. She may need to prepare how to talk about the purpose with the students, how to deal with the target language, and what materials or resources she needs to prepare in order to use seamlessly. Second, how is she going to transition between stages? What instructions does she need to give, and does she need to check them at all? And what questioning will she go through? And finally, how is she going to make sure that students are progressing through the task? Is there any behaviour that she needs to manage? And how can she be sure that the outcomes are met by the end of the activity? So that's 3 things: prepare, say, and manage that you need to do during this activity. Can you remember what they are?
Prepare, say, manage.
Beautiful. So while you're watching the video, which is about 4.5 minutes long, the first video, make some notes on these elements, and then we'll go through some feedback afterwards. So let's watch video 1. Over to you, Sophie.
Okay, great.
Fingers crossed.
Yes, so this is just a little, this is the first time that we've used videos on an English Australia webinar. So I'm going to just quickly put some troubleshooting information into the chat and send it to everybody. If you can't hear the audio, things that you might be able to adjust on your computer. And what I'd also really like you to do, I'm going to play the video and I'm going to pause it after the first 10 seconds. And when I pause it, if you could just type into the chat box, yes, if you can hear the sound, and no, if you can't hear the sound. And we'll continue, hopefully, if everyone's hearing the sound.
I'll probably be studying, and I might go down to the Gold Coast for a little while.
Okay, everyone.
So nice.
3, 2, 1. Hi, how's it going?
Hi.
Good. How are you? I'm good. Good. So now today we're going to do a speaking activity to practice using the present continuous. So how do we make the present continuous? Let's get some examples. What am I doing?
Running.
Very good. So you say you
Are
are
running.
Very good. You are?
Running.
You
You
are
are running.
What do we say? You are together?
You're.
You're. Good.
Oh, yeah.
You're running. You're running. Good. What am I doing?
sleeping.
Okay, give it to me with present continuous.
You are sleeping.
You are sleeping. Good. You are together.
You're sleeping.
You're sleeping. Excellent. Rufus, do something.
Mm,
Oh, Fiona,
brushing her hair.
what's she doing?
She is brushing her hair.
Very good. So she is
She's
good. She's brushing her hair.
brushing her hair.
Excellent. Fiona, do something.
Mm,
Rufus, what is she doing? What's she doing?
She's
Good.
drinking tea.
Very good. Drinking tea. Lovely. That's excellent. Okay. For this activity, we have two pictures, A and B. Oh, First, tell me, are these the same or different?
Same.
Same. Yeah. Same.
Same.
Same. Okay. Are these the same or different, Rufus?
Different.
Fiona?
Different.
Okay. Are these the same or different?
Same.
Same.
Excellent. Okay. So picture A and picture B are different.
Okay.
They're different. They're not the same. There are 10 differences. 10 differences.
It's a memory test.
Okay. Can I please have a volunteer? Yes, Vicky. Me.
Okay.
Okay. All right, Fiona. I'll give you picture B.
Okay. Thank you.
Keep it secret.
Yay.
Can she show me?
No.
No.
Okay.
Keep it secret.
Sure.
Keep it secret. Fiona, you need a pen.
Okay.
And I've got a pen too. Okay. So, in my picture, Fiona, the dog is sleeping behind the couch. Is it the same in your picture?
No, it's not the same.
Oh, what's the dog doing?
The dog is eating
Ah,
food.
those are the same or different?
Different.
They're different.
Okay.
So, Fiona, we're going to circle the dog.
Oh, okay.
Circle the dog.
Mm-hmm.
Circle the dog. Okay. Now,
Great.
tell me about your picture.
In my picture, the father is reading the newspaper.
Ask me.
In your picture, is the father reading the newspaper?
Yes, he is. They're the...
No.
Okay.
So we only circle if there is
A difference.
a difference.
Got it.
Very great. Very good. Thank you so
Thank you.
much, Fiona. Let's have a seat. Okay. Very good. So, quick check. Are picture A and picture B the same?
No.
No.
They're different. How many differences are there? Are there 7 differences?
No.
No.
Are there 8 differences?
No.
Are there 9 differences?
No.
There are 10
10.
differences. You have to find 10 differences. When you find a difference, should you circle it?
Yes.
Yes, you should.
Difference.
When you
Yeah,
find a
got it.
difference, you should circle it. Can you show your picture to your partner?
No.
No. Keep
Keep
it
it a
secret.
secret.
Keep it secret. Don't show your picture to your partner. Very good. And when we talk about our picture, should we use present continuous?
Yes.
Yes, we
Okay.
need to use present continuous. Don't forget. Okay. So now we'll put you into pairs. 2 people together. So come together.
Okay, great.
Great. Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome back.
And well done, English Australia, on your first webinar with a video. Thanks so much. All right, before we all forget video number 1, I'm just going to give you a second to think about those 3 things. In that part of the setup, what did Vicky need to prepare? What did she need to say? And was there any management in that activity? Just take a moment to have a think about that. And I will. Okay, our slides are back to great. So for the sake of time, we're going to move you through now some of the things that we picked up when we watched the video back or were involved in the activity. We noticed that Vicky was preparing these things that will come up in your screen in a moment. As you see them come up, if you had something similar written down, just give yourself a big tick in your list or notes. So here's what she needed to prepare. Obviously, as language teachers, we prepare the language and the materials, but what struck us was that Vicky also had thought about what she was going to say to share the purpose with students. So as we were talking earlier about setting up an activity like stand up and move into a circle, why? That could be really daunting. But if we simply let students know that the purpose of the activity, in a moment, we're going to do a speaking activity to practice our vocabulary from last week. So can I ask you to stand up and move into a circle? Now we're a little bit more comfortable that we know what's coming. In terms of what she was saying, here's what we noticed. So yes, she was using simple language, but as she was moving through, when she got to the end of the main stage of the setup, she actually stopped to ask students some simple questions to check that they'd understood the steps. And in particular, what she didn't say was,
do you understand?
Yes, I do, even if they don't. So we try and avoid using those blanket statements of do you understand? And I'm sure you've experienced that in your classrooms too. It's tempting and it's efficient, but it never really reveals if their students have understood the steps of the activity. So in terms of what she was managing, here's what we noticed. And it was great to hear that some of you had picked up on the importance of using gestures as well to signal meaning as we are using our verbal cues to give instructions to. So we're going to move into watching another video now. This is now the middle section of the activity, and we'll ask you to take notes under those same 3 headings. What did Vicky need to prepare? What did she say? And how did she manage? Let's watch video 2. This one's a bit shorter.
Don't forget. Okay, so now we'll put you into pairs. 2 people together. So come together. Good, then go together. Very good, very good. Okay, maybe I'll come around here. So, picture A, picture B, keep it secret. When I give you the picture, A, you start. Okay. In my picture, blah, blah, blah. Yep. Right, let's go.
Thank you. A starts.
Yeah, that's me. Okay, in my picture, the grandmother is eating chocolate. Is it the same in your picture?
No, it's not the same. So it's different.
So what's
We can
happening in your
circle it.
picture?
Ah, so in my picture, the grandmother is, I think she's waving to the TV.
Okay.
How
Okay.
about in your picture? Is she waving?
No, she's eating chocolate.
Ah, of course, of course.
Yeah.
So that's different. We
So
can
we circle.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Let's circle. Of course she
Of
is.
course she is. That's
So
definitely
it's
different.
different. We should circle it.
Well done, you guys. Good use of the present continuous. Yeah.
Okay, your turn.
My turn. In my picture, the cat is on the floor.
Oh, that's great, Rufus. Can we just stop for a moment? Think, how can we say that in present continuous? In my picture.
In my picture, the cat is sitting on the floor.
Okay, cool. So that's different. In my picture, the cat is sleeping on the sofa.
Well done. Well done.
We're
Right.
winners.
Yeah, good job. Okay, so that was video number 2, focusing on the middle. Just take a moment to think about, as the students were working, what was Vicky doing? Was there any material she needed to prepare? Just take a moment now. Recheck the slides.
Come back.
Sophie, we might need you to move the slide on for us, please. Thank you. So in the middle section, you will have seen that Vicky had prepared these things. Yeah, I think you'll have to keep doing our slides, Sophie. Thank you. So there were just a couple of things there. Obviously, she needed those Post-it notes and the pen. She was listening and taking notes. And she'd also thought about where we were all going to sit during the activity. In the next section, she gave us a lot of praise, actually, as we were going through, which really encouraged our willingness to keep going in the activity. And finally, she was managing these things. So we didn't hear very much from Vicky at all. She was moving around quite quietly, and she was sitting near us, but not too close to us, and certainly not standing over us. So she was quietly taking notes and preparing for that next plenary feedback stage. So we really liked that she had the notebook there with her, because often when we observe teachers, we see that they tell us that, oh, no, it's okay, I don't need to take notes, I'll remember what the students said.
Never happens.
But then we notice ourselves that we forget what those things were that came up during the activity. So we don't have anything ready to feedback on. So Vicky's strategy was very simple, just drawing a line of positive things she was hearing and negative things that students might have been doing incorrectly, so that she can prioritize those for later. So we're going to move now into video 3. Let's get ready to watch. Very cool. So that's different. In my picture, the cat is sleeping on the sofa.
Well done. Well done.
We're
Great.
winners.
Yeah, good job. I think that's 10.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. All right.
Oh, well done, everyone. Did you find 10 differences?
We did,
Yeah.
we
Oh,
did.
That's excellent. Please go back to your seats.
Okay, sure.
Okay.
That was fun.
So time's up. Let's hear some examples from your conversation. Fiona, can you give me an example from your conversation with Rufus? What difference did you find?
Well, in my picture, the father is drinking some coffee.
But in Rufus's picture?
But in Rufus's picture, he's not drinking coffee.
Oh, very good. That's right. That's what we say. Excellent. Thanks very much for that, guys. I heard a couple of people saying, for example, the boy listening to music.
Boy, listen.
What should it be? The boy
Is
listening to
The
music.
boys.
Yes. Very good.
Oh,
The
yeah.
boy is
Much
boys. The boy's
Boys.
listening to music. Very good.
Okay.
Okay, don't forget that is, am, are
Yeah.
when we make the present continuous.
Yeah.
Okay, now That's it for the speaking practice. Now let's do some writing practice of the present continuous from this activity. Please turn over your paper.
Okay.
Welcome back again. I think that's it. 3 videos successfully watched. First time ever. You were part of this, people. It's amazing. So how are our slides going? Great.
There we go. We've got them now.
All right. So with the ending of an activity, certainly one of the things that Fiona and I have noticed is that it's all too easy to run out of time to have a coherent end. And it's very easy to go, oh, sorry, run out of time. Bye, see you tomorrow. And that's the way we finish off activities. I know I'm guilty of it too. But planning can really help us. So you can see that how Vicky, using her gestures and using her other techniques, prepared how to close the activity. She'd clearly thought about what to say. And when it comes to managing, she had a very clear transition to the next activity, just like we're about to do here.
So in the transition stage, she moved us from speaking to writing, and that's really common. But throughout, now that you've seen all 3 videos of thinking about what to prepare, say, and manage, we thought we'd give you an activity to take away to consider in your own time if that's the area of focus that you want to spend your time developing further. So in terms of preparing activities, here are some considerations that you might want to think about. I'll give you a moment to read those. And here's what Vicky did. So she thought about the pairs and was gesturing to get us into pairs. She did demonstrate with a student. I was that student. She asked for a volunteer. And she didn't use the whiteboard, but she did certainly have those 4 marker pens, 2 red, 2 purple, to demonstrate and elicit the idea of same and different. And she was miming the target language. In terms of monitoring, she stayed with us near the beginning of the middle section and was just taking notes, and then stepped away so that she could really prepare what she was going to do with that language. So lots of you said in the challenges that you want to focus on your own teacher language and how do we remember it. And so we thought we'd share a couple of our scripts. You might notice that when we see Vicky's script in a moment, that's hers here on the left, she had highlighted some of the verbs for the stages. Obviously, it's a little bit more detailed for this session than it might normally be. But even for me, you'll see mine in the middle there. Sometimes it's when I've done an activity in the classroom that's worked quite well, I'll come out and say, well, I definitely want to do that again. So I'll spend a little bit of time scripting what I did. And I tend to keep my instructions on coloured paper so that I can find them when I'm getting ready for that activity in the classroom. What about yours, Rufus?
It's very different, isn't it?
Yeah.
I guess for me, I like to use a lot of colour, and I find it really quite tricky to have a linear lesson plan with instructions because I feel restricted by it. So I tend to use what you can see on the right, and it really does help me to transition between stages and identify what's classroom management, what are resources, and exactly what am I going to say. So that's clearly something that you are all going to be thinking about. If you have a look at these 11 steps, which is another way of considering what you're going to do and say during an activity, you can see that some of them are actions that the teacher's taking, other ones are teacher talk. Just take 10 seconds. Which 7 of these steps deal with teacher talk?
I'm not holding up. Now I want you to definitely saying that.
So let's bring the answers in. Did you get them right?
Well, I did.
Good, but I gave you the answers. So you can see that especially some of these steps 6 to 10, some of them deal with instructions, but also some of them deal with those really tricky ICQs where we're checking the instructions, and it is very difficult to do these I don't know about you. For me, especially spontaneously, it's very, very difficult to think of a clear ICQ on the spot. So scripting can be your best friend here. And if we look at the next slide, what we've done is we've looked at some functions of teacher language, and we've given you, this is just a takeaway, we won't go through it, some sample teacher language that you can use when you're scripting for yourselves.
Great. Thanks, Rufus. That teacher language is the part that we were hearing the most from our own colleagues about. That's the part that we struggle with the most. So that's a takeaway for you. We'll also leave you with this takeaway. If you're wanting to focus on the classroom management itself, we've given you an agree or disagree checklist of some of the do's and don'ts of classroom management. So we won't go through all of those now because we really want to make sure we've got some decent time for questions from the audience. But just have a look at those as I bring up the answers. What we think.
What we think of the answers.
So I think the first one about waiting, even though time is precious, we just can't get started on an activity unless all the students are with us, because we actually waste time later having to re-explain to other students. And similarly, as Rufus talked about, even though ICQs are difficult to think about in some ways, having those closed questions, they should be easy for students to answer. And it's not the students who are answering the questions that probably need it, it's the guy in the back that didn't hear the instructions in the first place. It's like, oh, so we're writing. Oh, so it's 3 things we should write.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
So here, I guess nomination could help.
Yeah. So we've come to the end of our webinar now. We've touched on each of these questions. Oh, except that last one.
The orange one, my favourite.
Yeah, I like it too. So we're just going to flick through some resources that you can look at in more detail when you download the slide set from the English Australia website later, we hope. And there are lots of resources available on YouTube. We really love this one in particular from the BBC. It gives lots of other strategies for giving instructions. And we also recommend filming yourself. Even though we're struggling to be on camera right now, we recognize the value of setting up your classroom to focus on just you, actually. You don't even need to have the students in the video to focus on how you're setting it up.
That's right. We'll watch this back. It'll be difficult, but we'll do it.
And we'll pick apart our instructions. There's also lots of open access resources that we've shared in the slide deck for if you're looking for activities or focus on teacher language, supporting learner progress. Notice I didn't say monitoring, supporting, and some other websites to get involved in chatting and talking about teachers and setting up activities over there on the right-hand side. So I think we're nearly at the end.
We're nearly at the end. We're not going to get you to do this particular thing during the webinar because we want to allow some time for questions. But if this was a face-to-face workshop and we could take you into the break slightly, we would do a face-to-face reflection activity where we might use post-it notes and ask you to identify one key takeaway from today's session and something that you want to shine the spotlight on with your own classroom practice. So as a reflective tool for you and for feedback for us, which is also very important for teachers to get, please, after the webinar is finished, if you can go to menti.com, you can scan the QR code, you can enter this particular code, 862896. 862896.
2896.
And give us some feedback and also reflect on how useful the webinar has been to you. And I think we have 5 minutes now.
Yeah.
For
some questions. We hope that you've enjoyed the session with us. We've certainly enjoyed hosting.
Yeah, we had fun.
And maybe there's a strategy or two in there that might help you to start your activity well and at least 99% of the time end well. So thanks, everybody. Over to Sophie for the questions.
Okay. Thank you. If you have any questions now for the presenters, please type them in. Oh, you have a very lovely comment. By far the best webinar I've attended in 2 years. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much.
Let's take us back to our references slide if people are looking.
And of course, all of these slides will be available afterwards. We'll also update, we'll add your answers for the answer garden in as well. So please feel free to keep putting in your answers for what challenges you face. That it's going to stay open for at least another week.
Maybe we should go back to the challenges slide. That might help people with their questions. Look at that magic. Thanks, Sophie.
Okay, there are a few questions that have come through. I'll keep going back. I'll just read out the first question. Do you generally follow up a demo with an ICQ?
Follow up the instructions with an ICQ?
A demonstration?
A demonstration
of an activity, you mean?
Yeah. Of getting the student to do something?
Oh, look, I probably would use one or the other unless it's very clear from the students' faces that they have an understanding. Because I think a demonstration is probably, it's more powerful because it actually very clearly displays what you're wanting from the student.
I think I might just ICQ something that they haven't seen necessarily in the demo. For example, Vicky was ICQing about how many things we had to find in the speaking activity we were going to do. So even though I'd understood from watching her demonstrate, well, being part of the demonstration, what to do, I'd probably forgotten that she said I'd need to look for 10 things. So that was a good point. So yes, sometimes I certainly would.
But I think one of the problems can be is that people often overuse ICQs. So that it's a very fine, very fine balance, I think. You don't overuse them. Some students feel patronized and it increases teacher talk as well.
Yeah, okay, sure. Someone said that they sometimes walk around to check if students are on task. Is this too domineering?
Oh, that's interesting. Look, no, I think that it depends on your demeanor. I think walking around, you couldn't see Vicky go off camera in a demo, but I think for both of us, we walk quietly. So we're trying not to draw attention to ourselves. But what I tend to do more often is I pull up a chair actually, and I'll sit near a group or near students working. And I'll, actively demonstrate that I'm listening in, or I might smile at them and say, I'm just going to listen in for a minute and stay and listen, and then get up and move around and pull another chair. So if you have a chair, like a wheelie chair in your classroom in particular, that can be fantastic. Or simply pulling up one of their spare seats at their desks and joining too.
Yeah, I totally agree. I often sit in the middle of the classroom, and I've trained my ear to zone in and out of different conversations, which takes a long time. But I find that quite effective because students don't realise that you're maybe focusing on them. But I also vary whether I monitor from the inside or the outside as well. But for me, certainly one of the most important things is what you do with that monitoring. If nothing comes from it in the end, or it's only ever critical feedback, I think students will start to find it maybe a little intimidating. So
I've definitely worked in large class scenarios in other contexts in places like Japan or in China, where there's such large rooms that you really have had to walk up and down aisles because there hasn't been another alternative. So in that case, I'm not pulling up a chair, but I am crouching down, so I get a good knee workout, crouching down to listen a little bit so that I'm at eye level with the students if I'm engaging in conversation with them in particular.
Yeah, I think my watchword would be unobtrusive.
Yeah.
Someone said that's a good knee
I find
workout.
it very difficult to be unobtrusive, to be honest.
My time.
Someone's asked what you think about giving quick feedback on the fly to certain groups.
Yeah, it's definitely tough. I think I will limit my feedback during the activity, and I might be more inclined to start noting a few things. I might offer an alternative to bring students back on track in terms of, you might have heard Vicky say, "That's right, Rufus, but could you try saying that in the present continuous?" So I might do that kind of reformulation, but I wouldn't necessarily give feedback to this group for long periods of time, because then I don't get a sense for what everybody else is up to.
Yeah, I
So
think
the
that's
notes
true.
work well for me, and we deal with that as a separate stage.
Yeah, I think the only time that I do tend to give
Excuse me.
immediate feedback is if it's directly impeding communication, which means that the student is not able to communicate what they want to do, or they have gone off on such a tangent that it's actually affecting their communication. Of course, it depends if it's fluency or accuracy. With fluency, I would always try and do delayed. Yeah.
Okay. Somebody's asked if you find giving students a time limit, especially for accuracy-based tasks, does that help? And if so, how do you know how long the task will take?
I think it's different for every group of students. For me, I find I might think it'll take 5 minutes, and one group gets into it in such meaty detail, a lot of meat here, isn't it? That I'm loath to stop them, whereas other students might finish very quickly. I use timings a lot, I've got to say. They are rarely accurate. So I might say you have 3 minutes, and after about 3 minutes, I'll say 2 more minutes. So I'll give initial, follow-up, and final timings. But I think you have to base it on the students who are in the classroom.
And I think one of the things for me in my preparation process in thinking about the timings, particularly if I'm giving students a reading activity or a gap fill or something to do, I actually make sure I've done it myself. So I know what the quickest possible timing might be for that activity, and then I can get a sense for making a better judgment, because I do think students having a time limit, even if we extend it, is a really helpful strategy to keep them on task.
Agree.
Okay, wonderful. So it is almost time to finish. There's a great question from the audience to finish on, which I'll relay to you now. Do you have any advice for Fiona of 1998 or Rufus of 2004?
How do they know
Could be
that?
someone with a bit of insider information.
They've been our bios. I think my advice to Fiona of 1998 would be to plan all of the stages, at least initially. And even if you're not referring to your plan during the lesson, I think that it's definitely something I didn't do enough. I thought, oh, I've got this teaching thing sorted, and I would get the setup okay, and I didn't get through the middle and the end as well. So it didn't end well. I think if I'd anticipated more and scripted a bit more in the early stages, it would become more routine for me. But it took me far too long to get my activities right, I think.
Yeah, I guess mine would probably be similar. I think at the beginning, and probably now to some extent, I relied maybe too much on my personality getting me through rather than the theory and having a very structured lesson plan. But Rufus of 2004 was excited and experimental, and I tell her, just keep going, you'll be in Brisbane one day, life is going to get better.
Yeah. And actually, I think the thing that I've learned now is that now I will admit when an activity hasn't been set up well. I think 1998, I would have said, just tried to brush it off and say, oh, that's what I meant for you to do. But these days I'll say, actually, let's stop. I'm sorry, I didn't set that up well. I can see you're having difficulty. Let me try again, and get comfortable with those mistakes.
Interesting. Okay. Well, we do have to finish up there. Thank you so much for presenting a thoroughly enjoyable webinar session. There's loads of comments here saying how much people enjoyed it. And you've certainly demonstrated the principle of what starts well, ends well through your presentation and the art of giving effective instructions. So thank you once again to our presenters.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you also to everybody who attended. Tomorrow we'll be emailing people the recording to today's webinar and also the slides so that you can look at some of those resources that our presenters have shared with you. And we'll also be emailing people a statement of attendance in the coming week, next week probably. So thank you again to everybody.
Thanks so much,
Thank
everyone.
you.
All the best with your activities.